Hey everyone, and welcome to the CNC Board Game Factory, a new show that is in itself a little bit of a design of sorts, and we'll see where it goes. My name is Chris. I'm one of the hosts.
And I am Cam, the other one.
Perfect. The video says Chris Yee and Campbell des Souza, so people don't be freaked out by the fact that Cam is short.
And don't be freaked out by the fact that I am so famous. Because I know it's kind of a turnoff sometimes. Like, I don't want to watch something if I know it's just like a big name production. But this is truly a passion project for me, my dudes.
Yes, yeah. This is so okay. We each have been in the board game sphere for a while, both as players of games for a while. We both had our own individual we have our own individual podcasts. Mine's called Meeple Overboard, a roughly half-hour podcast every week on Saturdays, which is a terrible day to post episodes, but why bother changing it now?
Yeah, and I do the Board Boys podcast with three other fellas in Des Moines, Iowa, and we mostly review highly rated or hot new games. So we do every other Thursday, which, I don't know, Chris, maybe you could change your schedule. You'd be the same day, compete.
Yes, yeah. Competition between friends is definitely... So basically, we had this idea. We're both in lockdown right now because of something 2020, whatever. It's a great year. So we're both in our homes a lot, and we both tinkered around with making and designing games before. And you reached out to me about this idea of making a show about it. So why don't we introduce what we're trying to do here?
Yeah, absolutely. So the other day, Chris and I had a tertiary discussion, and I think we both just found it really exciting. What if we were to do a show about pitching one another some board games and eventually take some of the best ideas and try to actually make a game out of them? And then I live in Iowa and Chris lives in Las Vegas, so maybe an inherent challenge there. But I think that despite the fact that we have very little experience, no idea how it works, and just an all-around physical barrier between being able to hang out and push cubes around together, I think we're going to be wildly successful at creating a game.
Yeah, I see no challenges, really, in this, the more and more that I think about it.
Yeah, frankly, I'm only optimistic about this situation.
Well, it's very cool because when you hear stories, I don't know if you've watched some of the speeches and stuff that Matt Leacock and Rob Davio talked about designing Pandemic Legacy. They live on opposite coasts of the United States, and so they did everything remotely.
The North Coast and the South Coast.
And so yeah, they just worked literally like this. They were stuck in Zoom calls all day before it was cool, essentially.
Yeah, there you go.
And so yeah, we can make it work.
I think so. So first game design tip is one of us has to be the creator of a wildly successful game. The other one of us has to be the wunderkind that basically created the biggest gaming trend in the last 10 years. And then we'll make this thing work pretty easily, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
So, which of those roles do you want to take on?
Well, let's see. I'll have designed one of the most unique and revolutionary board games in the last 20 years. How's that sound? And you be the guy.
Great.
You be the guy that's worked at some of the biggest publishing houses for the last 30 years of your career, or whatever.
Yeah, perfect. Okay.
You're the Davio to my Leacock.
Yeah, great.
I like that. You know what that makes me think of? It makes me think of there's like a little meme that goes around that says like Oprah's tips to live a stress.
I'm not listening. I'm checking this off the list. Okay, good. What was that?
There's a meme that goes around that's like Oprah Winfrey's tips to be stress free at in your 50s or in your 60s or whatever. And person responded and said, "Step 1, have $1 billion."
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, get really, really, really rich the decade before.
So why are we doing this? Like, we as in you and me. Like, why do you think that we could make a board game?
Well, okay, so here's my 3 bullets, and you can add to these. Feel free to send them right back. Maybe disagree with me, but I think you and I are both very interested in the way games work on a, like, we love to play games level, but we're absolutely not students of game theory level, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's an interesting. I think we always end up like talking about mechanisms of games with one another after listening to each other's casts. Two, I think we have a similar brain for what's interesting, what's cool, and what makes a good game, even if
Mm-hmm.
maybe I can't articulate it as well as you can with your golden pipes and huge brain. So I don't know what that says about you. And then third,
That I should have a different co-host, probably.
yeah, third, I think this is the most important thing. I think that we're geniuses.
I can't disagree in the least bit.
So those are my three reasons. I don't know. What do you got?
Well, I think that one of the things that a lot of people do is they put people on pedestals, right? And we're used to this idea of like an Olympic athlete. Like, I don't think I will ever be an Olympic athlete, even if I trained really, really hard my whole life. I don't have there's genetic limitations to being an Olympic
Well, if
athlete.
you're gonna do it, I would say curling is your best shot.
Probably, yeah, and
I think
maybe
it's my best shot too. That's not a knock. It's also a cool sport.
it is a cool sport. I agree with that. Eric Summer agrees with that, and he has a bigger brain and a better voice than mine. So we can't play this comparison game, right? Because Matt Leacock was not a professional game designer when he came out with Pandemic. He was a guy that worked for, like, he was a software developer, which, yes, that means he's a pretty smart guy, but there's no genetic limitation to being able to be a board game designer. Like, when I think about being, like, designing games and stuff, I don't know about you, but when I was in elementary school and we were playing pattern blocks, like put these, rhombus and hexagons together and make pretty shapes.
Pattern blocks.
I love pattern blocks too, and then one day I discovered that the little rhombus diamond pieces make really good catapults. And so,
Yeah, no, they did, because you could like whack down on one side. Yeah, 100%.
okay, 100% you and I have the same brain, I think. And so, in like third grade, whenever we had pattern block time, it accidentally devolved into me developing like a catapults game where everyone had 3 of the yellow hexagons, the big pieces, and that was their base. And we would just launch little triangles and squares and stuff at each other using these rhombus catapults and knock each other's hexes over. Like, I enjoy the idea of making stuff. I enjoy the idea of games and gamifying things that aren't always games. And it's funny because when I think back to that, I'm like, oh, I've always kind of done that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that I'm in the same boat, and here's my childhood claim to fame in game design.
Perfect.
Is well, actually I have 2. One is when I was like 11 and I learned about the concept of tabletop RPGs. Now it'd be about 10 years before I ever actually played one.
Mm-hmm.
I went into my Legos and I was like, I can create one of these. And I did, and it had no rule book, and my buddies and I tried to play it, and it had no dice, and it was no dice. But I tried. Second, a couple years later in late middle school, I did invent the sport of street bowling. A buddy of mine and I found a bowling ball and a couple of pins at a Goodwill. And, we set up a couple pins in the alley, made like ramps and traps and stuff, and it was kind of like a mixture of miniature golf and bowling, and with some seriously rashed bowling balls. Actually, one more game that my buddies and I developed in high school is a game called Judy, and it's a game where you have to slap your friend in the butt and not let them slap you in the butt. And if you get them, that's called a Judy. So we haven't played that one in a while, but
yeah, when you hit a certain age, Judy becomes illegal. And it's this is really eerie to me. You and I did not really plan much of this out, but like we planned out. Let's talk about a little about the history of like games that we made in the past and stuff. I did not expect you to talk about Rocky Road Bowling, which is an idea that I had independent of you of a mix of bowling and miniature golf.
Brilliant. That's exactly what it was too. We never figured it out at a high level, but this is this is something that we'll open a miniature golf bowling plex in Las Vegas one of these days. I think that'd be a great diversion for the families that go down there, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, Vegas in the '90s tried to be super family friendly, and you make a lot of these like goofier looking places like the Excalibur and uh, Circus, I believe, is also '90s. And all of that family friendly stuff has kind of gone away, except for Circus, which is the most like rundown possible hotel casino that there is. But that thing is still kicking. So, interestingly enough. But yes, Rocky Road Bowling, street bowling.
So did you end up doing it, or
No, it was all theoretical. It was all just sketches and notebooks and stuff of like, how do you get a bowling ball to go through a loop de loop? Well, it has to go down a ramp.
Popeye level forearms is how you.
Well, and so my thought was, well, it has to be the 18th lane, right? Like you'd have holes in golf.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have 18 lanes of Rocky Road bowling, and the 18th one would be like a big ramp down and go through a loop de loop, and then you see if you even hit a single pin. Like
the brilliant thing about that is you could fit 18 lanes in bowling, and you could set it up with ball returns and everything. I just don't exactly like. Would the goal be to, like, the goal would still be like you're playing 18 frames, right? And you're trying to knock over as many pins as possible while going through the thing, or are you trying to get the bowling ball into like a hole?
I would say knock over pins. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I did actually play a basketball mini golf hybrid last time I was in Orlando.
What?
That I thought was really cool. It was all about bank shots, so there were like all these like levels and like grades set up like around the hoop, and you had to like, it would tell you at each hole, this is what you have to do, and so your score would be how many shots you could do it in, like bank off of this thing to bank off of that thing to get it in the hoop, and that was very neat.
So to tie this back in to a relevant discussion at hand about board games, because now we have changed from the CNC Board Game Factory to the CNC Rocky Road Bowling Factory.
Exactly.
But I think that you and I have a brain to just gamify things, even sports. Like, we want to gamify things because there's something inherently fun about that. And a lot of people have that brain. A lot of kids have that mindset. So I think that's one of the beauties, is that literally anyone can be a board game designer. It doesn't take a rocket scientist, or it doesn't take years of academic training. And studying things like game theory would not help. And it would be really fun as we progress, and if we actually get a pitch that we feel like in future episodes actually developing. And I think it'd be really fun to bring in people who are game theory smart people who read into that type of stuff. But you and I are just amateurs, and that's fine, because Matt Leacock was an amateur in 2006, 5 or 6, when he started developing this little game of his called Pandemic. And so many people are just amateurs in the hobby who maybe eventually become full-time board game designers. But I think Klaus Teuber of Catan still spent his professional career as a dentist. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So if you're gonna get this sentimental about the beginnings of famous board game designers, would you at least edit in "Good Riddance" by Green Day while you're talking about this stuff?
I'll go grab my guitar right now so we can hit a YouTube copyright strike. Perfect.
Exactly.
Episode 1, you're down.
Episode 1, you are canceled. No, it's 100% true. But you actually have, and I'd like to start this portion of the podcast off with probably something. I would say it'll be a thing that'll be relevant in every episode. I like to call it Cam's Failure of the Week. We're going to talk about our attempts to design actual board games. Chris, I'm going to have you go first. Chris sent me a playable on Excel version of a game he has created, and I said that I would have time and that I would play it before we recorded this thing, and lo and behold, I have yet to do so.
Nice.
So,
yeah.
Cam's Failure of the Week.
Nice.
Maybe not the biggest one, but it was a failure.
No, that's a good tagline to your theme song there. if people don't listen to the Board Boys, one, they should, and two, Cam comes up with new songs pretty much on the weekly for stuff over there.
Well, I'm sure we'll be doing that here too, and I'm sure you'll be doing that as well. I think we may be CNC Design Factory, but I feel like we can also be a music factory as well.
Yeah, that we should see if the rights to CNC Music Factory are available. That'd be kind of cool.
Might be public domain at this point.
So I think to just kind of make a little roadmap really quick, we talked about this briefly. We alluded to it at least. So this episode is kind of like a get to know our history of stuff that we've made, including failures, lots of failures along the way. The next few episodes we foresee being kind of like pitch meetings, where like you and I were going to pitch ideas back and forth to each other. Maybe each of us will do one for a few episodes or something like that, and throw some ideas out into the ether. And then what we hope to do after that would be to maybe grab down one of those ideas and actually start like shaping it, making rules around the concepts that we discuss. And then if things catch on and if things work out, it would be fun to actually get into prototyping phase and start like actually tangibly making this.
Yes, I feel strongly that we are equal to the task, but my unbridled optimism is tempered with the knowledge that I am truly a buffoon. So, Chris, if we're going to make this work, we're going to rely on your big brain. Yeah, I think what I'd like to do, and maybe obviously we're running at this podcast the same way we're running at game design, is just like, let's do it. And I think this kind of enthusiasm can be checked by the fact that now we have a social contract to do this together, and so we can't just let it peter out now. But I would like for the next few episodes for us to pitch one idea to one another, and so the whole episode will kind of revolve around working on two ideas. But we'll see in maybe the next episode how long that takes. Mm-hmm. Because certainly if we get too down the rabbit hole on one, we don't want to be running like 2.5-hour podcasts here.
No, heavens no.
Yeah, but I think we can hash out some board game concepts in 1 hour and talk about two of them. But maybe I'm being optimistic there.
Yeah, I mean, and it depends. It depends how tangible of an object we bring to the discussion. It could be just an idea. The first game that I ever made, like I made a prototype for, that I would call like a modern board game, like after being introduced to Settlers of Catan and Dominion and Munchkin and stuff, was a game that I literally had a dream of. I had a dream that I played it, and I was I was in college at the time, and I was in an accounting class, like an entry-level accounting class, that I would always use this example in the textbooks of like, you're doing the books for Pizza Aroma Pizza Company. And so, Johnny Pizza Aroma needs your help balancing his books, and it was ridiculous stuff. And so I always I'm a big fan of pizza, just huge.
Well, yeah, 100%. I think we're a unified front on the pizza train.
Yeah. And so that was actually what I had a dream one day as I was studying for this accounting class, that I was playing a board game called Pizza Aroma.
Nice.
And so I mocked it up and I showed it to my accounting professor. I was like, hey, I had this dream. This was a weird thing, but here you go.
And your accounting professor was like, yeah, you're still getting a C-, Chris. Maybe stop dreaming about pizza in my class. But
it was cool, man. It was that was like the first functioning game that I ever made. It was, 3 parts Settlers of Catan, and it was only 4 parts, which is a problem. So it was a lot of Catan. It was like building out onto this map, and then you would roll dice each round and collect resources based on where your pizza shops and stuff were. You wanted to set collect so that you could make different types of pizzas and collect victory points. And one of the things that I liked about that game was it had event cards that you would draw at the start of every turn. For some reason, if you design a game where you draw an event card at the start of every single player's turn, 9 out of 10 times people will forget to draw that card. So lesson learned, you have to like make things really make sense. If you want to put something in there just because it sounds fun, you like it will be unintuitive. And so it was a big failure in terms of like being a fun game to play. It was playable, but it was too long. It was too random for how long it was. It was in my mind like, oh, like I designed this like 45-minute long game, and then I'm playing it with my brother and my wife, and it's like an hour and a half in, and we're not even close to the end of the game yet. It's like, hey, we can just pack this up and play a real game now, like Dominion.
But that was the first foray. But you had a game created. So how many games have you created since then? Board games.
Well, I mean, it depends if you want to look at something that I've made that's like playable and actually hashed out. I've probably made like 3 or 4. Not all of them are great, but some of them are really fun that I have high hopes about. And I have a notebook just full of ideas, like half figured out, and at a stopping point of like, oh, I wonder if I could do something more with this, stuff like that.
Let's leave that stuff, because that stuff, Chris, that I'm hopeful that maybe you can bring to the discussion board. You know, I don't know. Like as we think about this cast, it's like I think we want to each come with one idea every time until we have a good amount of ideas. But I think it's fair game to say, hey, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think it's fair game to go like, I think it's fair game to go, I had this idea 15 minutes before we started the podcast, and this is what I want to talk about today. I think both of those are good. I think both you and I are the kind of guys who probably sometimes roll on just sheer force of charisma, without a formulated plan. Or maybe I'm wrong about that. I'm definitely one of those guys that's just like, yeah, I had this idea, and you ask questions, and I just have to make up the answers as I go. I think that's fair, but I love that you have a notebook full of game ideas. I have probably not a similar amount, but I have several ideas I've had for games in the past that I intend to maybe chat about, unless I think of something more exciting in the meantime. So
15 minutes before we start recording, hey, you know what's great? You're just burning this notebook. What are you doing, Cam? No. It's all up here. It's all in the noggin.
I was cold. I go off the dome. I don't write my verses. Yeah. They're in the brain. Nobody can steal this notebook.
What about you? Have you ever like designed a game all the way like so that it's functional and working and has rules written out and stuff?
I have created with my friend Eric Johnson, aka Easy Jeezy.
Eric Johnson, the guitarist of the Cliffs of Dover?
Yeah.
Dang.
Oh, I don't. You never heard of the Cliffs of Dover? Sorry, I should have probably, but.
Oh, Eric Johnson is an amazing guitarist with one of the smoothest guitar tones out there. Continue on the actual topic, please.
I'm just googling these guys now so that I can check them out when we're done recording. The Cliffs of Dover.
Yep.
Googled. Boom. Oh, okay. So it's a song by Eric Johnson. It's not a band.
Correct.
All right. Maybe I've heard it. I don't know. We'll find out. Okay. So about 8 years ago, I want to say, we wrote over the span of a summer a strategy board game about running. I can't remember if they were minor league baseball teams or major league baseball teams.
Okay.
And this was quite the undertaking. We intended this to be like a 3 to 8 player game.
Oh, nice.
During which every player manages a baseball team from scratch through an entire season of head-to-head matchups, in which every round, every player plays one of the players, or with an odd number of players, or like a weird bracket. We also had like AI players in there as well that you could roll against.
Nice.
And after the season, you would get your seeding order for the world's, like the playoffs, and play all the way to the World Series, and that would be the winner of the game.
Now, would this be something that you would play like over weeks, like a tabletop RPG, or was this concept like sit down for like a few hours and you can like pound through a whole season?
Our goal was for it to be a 2-hour game, but let me tell you what this game involved here. So I have the whole prototype sitting in my closet. Maybe in the next episode I'll get it out and show you some of the cards we made. But basically, it all started. The game started with you choose a team, and we had very fun names. I can't remember. I'll give you some of the names on the next cast. I think one of them was like the Baltimore Orange Sox or something like that. But we had all sorts of other.
The Baltimore Oreos.
Yeah, I think we had a team called the Slammers. I'm pretty sure we had one of those. We had a bunch of good baseball team names, and each team, and this is our first mistake. Each team would have their own set of stats to begin the game.
Yes, that is such a thing that I did with like Pizza Roma. We're like, oh, here's everything is different. You can take a loan at a certain percentage of this value, and you're like, no one wants to do those calculations.
Yeah, so the stats, I think each team had 5 stats to start out with. It was their hitting, their power, which was how well they would hit home runs, pitching, defense, and I think like finesse, which was like how they're pitching. Well, no, I think we ended up making pitching one thing. So sorry, we have hitting, power, defense, and pitching, right? Well, what you would do every round in the game before each matchup, like you would do all the matchups at the same time, but before each set of matchups, everybody would get to go into like their into their like stadium player board. And I can't remember, I think we had some drafting rules set up, but like a whole market board would come up. You'd flip up players you could get, equipment you could purchase, stadium upgrades, financial upgrades, action cards, just a myriad of things. And then you would buy like equipment that you could like affix in like an equipment slot on your board that would maybe increase your batting by 1. Or you could get a player who had like special abilities that you could activate during the games, and you would upgrade your stadium to make more money during games, and it went on and on. So then,
why did this play in 2 hours, Cam? Why did this play in 2 hours?
Right. So then, after you buy your stuff, you have your first matchup, and everybody we had this set up so that everybody could do it like just against the other player, in real time, and everybody could just do their matchups all at once, where you didn't have to watch the other people's, and you could just record the winner and loser. But this is where we truly jumped the shark, Chris. So everybody had kind of a pool of organization that was similar to. Have you played Twilight Imperium?
Yes.
Okay, so you know how you have those 3 pools of like, I have one set of tokens here, I have one set of tokens there, I have another set of tokens. When I get them, they can go into any pool. I spend some, I keep other ones. We had a similar situation where you would receive these tokens over the course of the game, and you could put them in your batting pool, your pitching pool, or your defense pool. And that was how many dice you got to roll. And by the way, we're using D12s because we thought we could make like white ones with like little red stripes around. But anyway, here is the function, and I'm gonna tell you exactly how the function of this worked. By the way, this is the only game I'm gonna talk about from my personal game design. So you would first look at the home team's pitching pool. So like, let's just say you have 10 in there, so you get to roll 10 pitching dice. You would roll 10 dice, and you would look at like the pitching level. And so like, say your pitching level is 11. Every dice that was an 11 or 12 was considered to be a strikeout, right? So what you would do is say I roll 4 strikeouts with my 10 dice. Then you look at the visitor team's pitching pool, and they have like 10 in there. It's like, okay, well, you get to roll 6 dice now because you got struck out 4 times. So then you look at they roll their 6 dice. You look at their hitting level. That might be like a 6. And you look at their power level, which might be like a 12, right? So then every dice that was a 6 or above counted as a hit, and every dice that was a 12 would count as a home run. So you take all the 12s, put them out, and you score that many runs. Then you look at your hits. So I might have 3 hits in there too. You look at the home team's defense pool, they get to roll that many dice, and every number that was within the defense level blocked one of the hits from becoming a run. So you do that for the home and visitors, then you flop it, and whichever team had more runs won the game. And I think we were concerned about timeliness, so I think there was ties in our. I don't think we played like. I don't think you kept rolling until. But you know what? We were insane, so you probably did. You probably did keep rolling. I'll find the PDF of the instruction booklet. So.
This is gloriously painful.
Yeah. Okay? So you do this like 10 times over the course of the game, and then you. Then you have an entire playoffs too, and I don't know if like the World Series is best out of 3 games or something like that too. But we were like we play tested the game one time, and like an hour and a half in, we'd finished our first round of games, and we're like, "There's no way." But here's the thing, it was kind of a cool concept, and like we really thought it was neat, even though we were like it just took us forever to play it because we thought that it had like a really neat like baseball statistic sort of thing. And at that time in my gaming career, I was this was like 9 years ago, when a lot like I was really into like big box thematic games because I wasn't doing as much like tabletop stuff. No, like if I had known about legacy games then, if they were a thing,
oh yeah,
it would have been so easy to set this game up to be like, yes, tonight you're going to work on your team for a little bit, and then you're going to play a game, and we're going to pack it up, you're going to keep everything, and then we'll set it back up, and you can do as many rounds of the game as you want. But we had the concept in our head that it was just going to be all one play, and we were like, this would be like a 12-hour game if we knew how to play. And we're playing with like 8, we want to play it with like 8 people. That's insane. It's insane. So there it is. I can't remember what the name of the game was tentatively titled.
Baseball Aroma.
Yeah, Baseball Aroma. Love it. So that's my first foray into game design.
Oh, man.
And since then, I've tinkered with a couple other things. Nothing reached completion, but I was not discouraged by that whole process. Because as we were doing it, I learned more about board games, and just like starting to play more types of games with more people and all that stuff. I didn't find it a discouraging process because I started to learn what made games fun, and I was like, you could go back and tinker with this any way you wanted, and it was like a cool idea. But if you really want to make a game one of these days, you got to play a ton of games. You got to learn what people like and why they like it. And you didn't do any of that before creating this game. You just created a game. So no need to get down on yourself for making something super unplayable. You just didn't have any knowledge of it then, right?
Oh, yeah. And that's the same thing with Pizza Aroma. Was I had played. I mean, weird. We're also talking about like 6-7 years ago that I made this, and I had played some games. I had played Dominion and Catan and Munchkin, and
those were the games I had played when we did this thing, and also Twilight Imperium, and Puerto Rico, and Kalis, and maybe Agricola.
Right, and yeah, I mean, we maybe played Lords of Waterdeep or something at that point too. But I loved the idea of Pizza Aroma, and in my mind, I do still love the idea of it. It had audits in it because it was in my accounting textbook that this dream came from, that I made a game and then I designed it. Like, you could get randomly slammed at some points. Like, you could do illegal activities. So on top of this, be like Settlers of Catan kind of copy that it really was, and all of this, it took place over a calendar year. So every round, all 3 or 4 players, 2, 3, 4 players would take a turn, and that was January. Then it would go into February. And I liked the idea of like a 12-month system, because that meant over the course of the game, whether you play 2, 3, or 4 players, everybody gets to be first player an equal amount of times. 12 is perfectly divisible.
that's a good amount of rounds to play in a game, and I agree with you 100% there.
Yeah. Every round was just way too long.
Well, and here's the thing: I didn't actually mention this. There were global events every single round in the baseball game as well.
Global events like baseball becomes illegal, or there's a worldwide pandemic or something.
There would be things where like a new commissioner would get hired and he'd change like the rules. There was one where like there would be like a fundraiser where somebody. There's a fundraiser where like some bad shrimp got in the hors d'oeuvres table, and you had to like roll a dice and see if your players got food poisoning. And there was like a black market system in the game too, I think, where you could like kneecap other people's players and take them out for a game. Like I think there were action cards you could buy, and I mean it was a glorious mess. I mean, because we had played a lot of computer games, and computer games offer infinite possibilities within a user interface that makes sense. And so we were excited for like this big simulation, like all these crazy things you could do. And we just didn't realize that board games can't do that, you know?
Oh, no, yeah. And so same thing, right? There was illegal behaviors that you could do in Pizza Aroma. You could cook your books to make it look better so that you could finance things easier. You could do like a smear campaign of other people's restaurants and stuff, and then like, but and it had this mechanism which at an individual level I liked the mechanism where if you do, depending on the severity of the illegal deed, the record of it stays out for a certain number of turns. So we had this like card turning system. Like at the end of your turn, rotate the card one thing, and this was like a 3-level illegal activity. So you had to rotate 3 times before it wiped. And which was a complete nightmare to track, and it was just an absolute mess. And was it that once it rotated once, was that 1, or was that technically 0? You know, and so people would sit there and rotate around and be like, "Is this still here, Chris, or not?" I don't even remember. I don't know how the rules work. And then you could get audited, and depending on the number of illegal activities you had while you were audited, you would get punished. You know, and of course. The Munchkin-esque inspiration was, well, if you get punished, you have to destroy one of your restaurants or something like that, because that's kind of thematic. You lose business and stuff. But guess what is incredibly unfun in a game like this? Is destroying an entire restaurant.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Shrimp.
This is gonna be
bad shrimp.
This is gonna be a fun podcast, Chris.
It is. And I love your point that you learn so much from your failures, right? The way that you describe Baseball Aroma, I 100% can see myself writing out ideas, talking with friends about it, and they're like, "What if there was bad shrimp? You know, what if you could kneecap other players?" And you're like, "That's a great idea. Jot that down." You know,
Did I mention that like 90% of the cards had flavor text? Oh, Chris, we really ought to make a board game.
I mean, 7, 8 years does give one a little bit of insight, at least. And it is, like you said, it's a glorious mess. And it was Stephen King. There you go. I was like, Stephen Hawking? No. Stephen King, the author, the writer. He has this really good essay that I read in one of my English composition classes in college. It was like the one thing that stuck with me in an English class, where he talks about if you want to be a writer, you have to read a lot. You have to read and read and read, and you have to read good stuff, and you have to read terrible stuff. And this bit of advice really stuck with me, right? Because Stephen King says one of the most instructive books he ever read, he cannot remember the name of, by some unknown author who was like a penny per word pulp author back in the 50s or something like that.
Sure.
And so he's like, I don't remember what the book was called, but I just call it Spice Miners in my mind, because it was about, or asteroid miners, because it was about going into space and mining asteroids for materials. He says, well, for whatever reason, the author of this particular book fell in love with the word zestfully. So the hero would embrace the female counterpart zestfully, gazing into her eyes. They would zestfully dig into the body of these asteroids, zestfully this, and it was And so he's like, my takeaway is that I have used the word zestfully in my work 0 times in my life. And so I've wanted to write a thank you letter to Stephen King for writing this essay and just be like, thank you for really encouraging. Like, that was a lesson that really stuck with me. Zestfully yours, Chris Yee.
Zestfully. What a word. That's... Yeah,
what
that's
a word.
That's great. So we have both created some board games I think we're not proud of, but I think, and I would like to check it out. But I think you recently designed a game that you are somewhat happy with, right? Or maybe very happy with.
I'm extremely jazzed about it. I'm going to speak about it very tentatively, but one of my favorite games. Okay, so here's what I've done recently: is I've had lots of ideas and I've put together some of them and stuff. When Matt Leacock talked about the Pandemic Hot Zone series that he's doing, the little 20-minute version of Pandemic. They made the Ticket to Ride New York and London, which are the 20-minute Ticket to Rides. I really like this idea of taking an existing game and parsing it down. So recently I made my own little variation of a mini Pandemic where you could actually not just treat the cues and they go away, but you could actually put them onto your player card as samples and bring them back to the research center in the middle of the board. And those represent your attempts to cure it. I also wanted to parse it down to just one deck of cards. And I was like, man, I really like this idea of taking an existing game and miniaturizing it or simplifying it. And
Sure.
It's a really good exercise in not letting your game turn into a 12-hour baseball slugfest. And so I've been messing around, tinkering with some roll and write versions of bigger games. One that I feel really good about, and hopefully it would be really nice to actually be able to get this playtest enough and feel comfortable submitting this to Board and Dice. But Teotihuacan is one of my favorite board games out there, and so it already has dice in it that you don't roll. So there's an inherent challenge of how do you take a game that has dice that you don't roll and make it a rolling dice game. And I feel really good about the way that I put together this little thing. So
I will say I've read half the instructions and I'm really excited to check it out. I had a really busy day yesterday. Then I got thoroughly engrossed in the middle of the night playing Civilization 6, and that's on me.
I think that might be considered a better game than my little Teotihuacan dice prototype.
Do people like the Civilization series? I wasn't aware. Is it moderately popular?
Moderately popular, yes. There's only 6 of them.
It is a game of marginal acclaim. No, I'm really excited to check this out, and actually, to throw back our friendship, Chris, I think one of the first conversations you and I ever actually had was about Teotihuacan versus the Castles of Burgundy, and because I think I went out there and it's it doesn't really get better than the Castles of Burgundy.
You said it was the best dice game out there.
Yeah, early in the Board Boys history, and I think at that point I'd played Teotihuacan maybe 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I would have considered Ticini one of my all-time favorite designers yet, because I feel the journey of board gaming and then talking about board games, just like playing a billion board games, opened my eyes to the way I feel about board games. Trying to think critically about what I like about board games and to put on the objective hat and the reviewer hat has changed so much my opinion on gaming too in the last, I don't know, 3 years or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm trying to say is, you're probably right. Teotihuacan is great.
It's so good.
But recently we have played Castles of Burgundy, and recently we've played Teotihuacan, and both games were a very fun and satisfying experience still. So, but I think Teotihuacan will stand the test of time with me as much as Castles of Burgundy has. But we'll have to wait 8 more years or something like that.
Yeah,
we'll
see.
When did Burgundy come out? 2011, something like that.
Probably, yeah. I think it was early. I mean, it's been out long enough that it's considered a classic. It's just a game of renown. So, Castles of Bourgeoisie.
The Hexagons of Adjacency.
The Hexagons of Adjacency, that's what we're calling it, yeah. That might be the next... 2011, spot on, sir. Hexagons of Adjacency might end up being the name of the game that we create, no matter what. Whether it even has hexagons or not.
Hexagons of Adjacency, yeah. I have been tinkering around with another, and I've talked about it on the podcast a couple times. I've been tinkering around with the name Colored Cube Manufacturer.
Perfect. And so one of the funny things too is that when you have a game like where you're talking about with a baseball game, I think it absolutely makes sense to like really be married to that theme. But it is funny when you hear interviews and stuff with a lot of different designers who say, like, I think it's Bruno Cathala who just said, like, I don't really care what the theme of a game is because I know no matter what I submit to a publisher, they're going to just change it. So I don't get too married to it. So literally, we could design Color Cube Factory Manager or whatever you just said, and that's not like a terrible pitch idea for companies because they can say, well, we've been looking for a dinosaur game anyway.
Really, that's funny. I was talking about how the board would be double-sided, and it would be exactly the same. And on one side, it would just be gray, and on the other side, it would just be a map of the Mediterranean Ocean.
But with like your baseball game, and I can't get over that. That's such a great
Hang on,
idea.
sorry, Chris, I just said Mediterranean Ocean, and I'm really Mediterranean Sea. Sorry,
Yes.
back to the baseball game.
No, I didn't want to. Just like actually, Campbell. I want to fix my glasses here. But no,
I don't think it's a glasses. I don't think it's a glasses fixing move to tell me that the Mediterranean Sea is not an ocean.
Okay, really quick question for you, Cam. How many oceans are there in the world?
Oh man. Okay, so Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, Arctic. I feel like I'm missing an ocean. There's 5 oceans, right? There's 7 seas.
Which is completely incorrect.
Yeah. What ocean? What ocean am I missing?
So, are there 4 or are there 5 oceans in the world, Cam?
Hang on. What's the 5th ocean? How do I not know the easiest geography question of all time?
Because when you and I were in school, we were taught that there were 4 oceans, the ones that you just named.
Okay.
And by the time that my friend's little brother was in school and asking him and I for like geography homework help, we were like, okay, well, there's 4 oceans, Curtis. And he was like, no, my teacher said there's 5. And my friend's like, Curtis, you're an idiot. You're clearly not paying attention in class. Curtis opens up a textbook. He shows them the 5 oceans. The 5th one is the Southern Ocean.
Oh, where like the Pacific and the Atlantic kind of
And the
gel
Indian.
together.
Yeah, it's like everything around Antarctica, which it was dumbfounding to me. I can't believe that there's now 5 oceans and 8 planets, but I'm just a troglodyte.
The Southern Ocean.
The Southern. It doesn't even have a good name.
Yeah, can't you think of a better name for the ocean?
Anyway, but yes, so that's an aside. The point I want to make about your baseball game is, it is funny that it would make, in actuality, probably a great legacy game if you could parse down the stats and everything, if you could figure out how to manage 8 different teams playing this World Series type thing. But like the fact that board games have gone through a lot of changes in the last few years opens up possibilities for things like that were at one point admittedly a terrible idea, but now could actually be a viable idea. I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, and I think like there would be some major changes that would need to be made. I still do like the idea of like rolling dice to determine baseball outcomes, because if you know, baseball is a very statistical game, or sport, I guess, and even like the best teams, generally, they don't win all their games. The best hitters only hit the ball 30% of the time, but definitely the way we had that set up was lousy, and so fixing that would be quite the undertaking, and it's not what I hope if we end up working on Baseball Aroma as for this podcast, I hope that's not what we're doing.
It sounds like a rework from the ground up project, which is another thing that a lot of designers that I've heard talk about their games also say, is that you just have to know when it's time to scrap a project, which is why I have a notebook full of half-done ideas that I'll probably never develop, but there's probably one of those ideas that actually is a gem, and so I'm going to look through that and see what I particularly feel like pitching next week or next time that we actually record.
Well, yeah, and actually, so there were lots of ideas that I would have had like back in the day. Again, this is before I started playing tons of board games. Like I played
Hmm.
a lot of like this was back when I was the guy who loved board games to my friend group
Yeah.
before I became like the initiate of the board game club I was part of, you know.
Yeah,
That was,
exactly.
you know, and then before I became like one of the silverbacks of like the board game people that I play with. Then I get into podcasting. I'm like this brand new podcaster. It's just a constant cycle of going from a larger fish in a small pond to a minnow in the biggest thing. And so now, of course, you know, now that we do a podcast, and so do you, that you know, a
Hmm.
decent amount of people I think listen to both of our podcasts. Not a lot of people. You know, we're mildly, I think, successful both. You know,
We're
um,
adequate. Yeah.
right. Now we can take this jump into being the absolute worst game designers. But you know, then once we're the best at that, then we can take on spaceflight, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Once we're
Yeah,
the best terrible game designers, then we can be decent. Then we can become terrible decent board game designers, and I think that's what it. I think that's what it takes. It's just
yeah,
it's what is it, Jake the dog at Adventure Time, that says, the first step to be sucking at something is the first step to becoming sort of good at something.
I do not know if that's who says that and when
Yeah,
or why.
I've never watched Adventure Time, but I like the memes. I tend to like the memes.
I don't
uh,
know if I've seen the memes. I feel like I see a lot of memes. I don't know. I did. That show's just has not hit my radar so much.
which
Maybe
is
it's a Twitter
weird.
thing. I'm not on Twitter.
Which is weird because from what I understand, my friends who really like it are also really big into D&D, and so it's kind of this world inspired by
Sure.
that fantasy, almost RPG type thing. So I don't know. Maybe I should eventually check it out, but it's never grabbed me because it just honestly looks gross.
Yeah,
But
no, like I agree. Like I don't like the art style, and that's not I don't like the art style or I don't like the art style. I just, eh, you know, who cares?
yeah,
It's just not I'm not into it. Um, but maybe it's great.
maybe it
So
is. Yeah.
maybe I'll watch a couple episodes and then have a different opinion. So I think it's probably a good time to shift into talking about as we gear up for you know, starting to pitch some games. Uh, what what are some things that have really impressed us recently? You know, thinking like, oh man, this is such a cool mechanism in a game, or this is designed in such a way that I can almost find nothing bad to say about it.
Mm.
Um, what has really been on your, I don't know, we don't need to like go super down the rabbit hole here, but what are a couple things that have really caught your attention in game design in you know, since you kind of started thinking about this stuff?
I would say one of my favorite things in general is multi-use cards, and whenever I see a game that is either multi-use cards, like that's it, or a game that features it in a really clever way, I tend to gravitate towards those games. Like I would say, my favorite mechanism is worker placement. It's a tried and true favorite mechanism. But multi-use cards, I feel like, is a more adventurous design space, right? You have a game like Glory
Oh
to
yeah.
Rome or something, which is just nothing but this fatty deck of cards, or Race for the Galaxy, which is this fatty deck of cards, and every card is allowed to do something completely different, but it's also allowed to be spent as currency, or you can tuck it here to do this, or you can play it for this ability. And so you have 3 cards in hand, but you really have 9+ potential actions that you can do with it. That has been something that I've discovered I'm really, really liking.
So would you consider Race for the Galaxy to be like the most elegant of those, with just like cards as currency, but also um, you know, something you actually utilize for the text on them? Because it really, you know, they're multi-use cards, but they really only have what, like 3 purposes.
Right.
Um,
I would say maybe the most elegant multi-use card game would be San Juan, because Race for the Galaxy is, you ask anybody who plays it for the first time, did you have fun? And they say, I didn't know what the pictures meant, and so
right.
there is an inherent inelegancy in that. Whereas San Juan, everything is
Well, yeah,
beautifully
the bar
straightforward.
is very high for entry. The barrier for entry, I think, is very high on Race for the Galaxy, and I think it's, having played a billion games of it within like 2 weeks, a couple months ago, after having played it 5 or 6 times, once, you know, a year or whatever, I started to understand why people love it so much. But like, even as a guy who likes crunchy, competitive type stuff, that was, for me, it's just like, I don't even know what I did this game. But then
Right.
once you learn the deck, it's like, oh man, I actually know what I want to, have at the beginning of the game, and I know what to do with. Now I don't think I'll ever be good at it, but I
Hmm.
at least would win some. But I've never actually played San Juan, so
Oh, never.
no, I haven't, and I really like Puerto Rico, so it's crazy that I haven't.
Hmm. Yeah.
So what's the deal there?
What's the deal with San Juan
Yeah,
versus
yeah,
Race of the Galaxy? San Juan is just a little more straightforward. It has production buildings and it has the special ability buildings, which in Race of the Galaxy would be the difference between the technology and the planet cards, right?
right.
They were actually designed with the same intent of how do you make Puerto Rico the card game, and Tom Lehman versus Andreas Seyfarth pitched ideas to each other and ended up going in two different directions amicably, from what I understand, and said, "You make your game, I'll make mine."
Sure.
And so yeah, San Juan is just it's simpler. The action drafting, the action selection is more straightforward, similar to Puerto Rico, whereas Race for the Galaxy has that simultaneous selection, hidden reveal type thing. And so they just had some design differences that I think make San Juan an overall smoother game, less barrier to entry, but equally fun, tinkery, engine buildy. Who knows if you'll ever get to play that game with a similar strategy two times because there's just so many cards and everything. So, Race for the Galaxy is a game I want to get better at, though, because the last time I played it was a few years ago, and it was still intimidating at that point. I'd like to get past that intimidation point to just enjoy the deck, enjoy the cards that come out. And I think maybe at that point my idea of how elegant it is or not will change, because I'm sure once you play the game, like really play it, it's an elegant experience. I can see that.
Yeah, I think the game when you know it is really nice. Yeah, I don't think it'll ever be in like my top favorite games, but
Hmm.
I understand the appeal to people. Like I think it's one of those games where you can bust it out really quickly. Um, like if you're playing against two or three other people who know the game well, the
Hmm.
wins are really meaningful. It's one of those games where you can be like, oh, it really, that was awesome. But then at the same time, I wonder how much of it is just lucking the cards you want to. So
I,
who knows?
who knows? Yeah, I enjoy games that fit in a realm, generally speaking, where luck can play a factor. And so if you're playing at the table with a couple people for the first time, I think there's nothing wrong with a new player maybe eking out a win. There's just enough luck that an experienced player could try something and it maybe not work out. But that generally speaking, the more experienced, better player will win 75+% of the time. And I think that's the realm that I kind of like to.
Oh yeah.
I like to kind of stick in. So, how about you? Anything game design wise that you've seen recently that just sticks out as something that tinkers with your brain and makes you want to think about it more?
Well, so I always go back to like there are aspects and mechanisms in games I love, and I tend to like wobbly like point salady games. But I appreciate you were talking about worker placement because I think everybody just goes, worker placement is like the standard Euro board game thing. But I love the whole concept of worker placement because generally speaking in those games, you have to prioritize what's important to you, and you know when you're playing that you probably won't get everything that you want. So what you have to do is you have to constantly make these small contingency plans of like, well, let's say it's like a resource collection game, like Agricola or Caverna or something. It's like I need to get these things. How do I use my 4 workers to absolutely get this stuff for sure, but then also do as much of the other stuff that I could maybe get ahead for the next round as possible.
Hmm.
And I think nothing scratches that itch like worker placement because there's like the developing meta when you play a game with the same type of people, like what's important and what's valuable. But then you can play a game against a different group of people and test different strategies and find that people value things differently in one of those games. But it's constantly like this efficiency puzzle and contingency plan, and I think doing that in games makes me feel like I'm having a really good time because I like to get a little frustrated when
Mm.
things don't go my way. I think that's a
Hmm.
fun feeling, and then like having to figure out how to persevere in a game. um
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. But as far as like 2 designs I think that really wowed me, some of the most important things for me, uh, in a game being on my shelf and like having a perennial spot on the shelf and still playing it with relative frequency 5 years after I got it, is if a game is really unique, in my opinion. Uh, sometimes it's hard for me to pick which of the wobbly dobbly games I want to play, because despite the fact that they're all brilliant and all really well written,
Hmm.
it's like, am I feeling Grand Austria Hotel, or am I feeling Marco Polo, or am I feeling Coimbra? You know, am I feeling Zolkin, or am I feeling? Well, Zolkin is a really unique game, actually.
Really unique, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But am I feeling? I don't know, any of those other games. It's like they're all kind of flavors, but they're all ice cream, kind of, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Uh, two games that really stuck out to me in the last few years, though. The first one is Alchemists, um,
Hmm.
from Czech Games Edition. Um, I think that their use of a worker placement point gathering game, adding in a puzzle that is not hard to solve if you do it on your own, but if you solve the puzzle and take a lot of time to solve the puzzle, you're not going to have as much time to get points. So the balancing act in Alchemist, the mechanism I think is really cool in it, is that you have like this secret information, but you have to kind of give up tidbits with the assumptions that you make
Hmm. Okay.
to score points, but then other people can utilize those tidbits to now come and also try to score points. And if they've spent more time like learning the puzzle than you, the tidbits you give them might help them even more. Um, I think that is, I just don't think there's anything else like it out there. And so if I were to like look at like, man, who really made it, may be a one-hit wonder. I haven't played anything else by the designer Kotri, or however you say his name.
Hmm.
But I think it's like something that's always going to be on my main shelf for the rest of my board gaming days.
Okay.
So I think about like incredible game design. I'm like, man, is genre defying, totally unique stuff that I can't point a finger and go like, this has major problems, right?
Yeah.
So that's one game that, like, if you ask me like, man, what kind of game would you want to design? Something so unique like that. The other game, and maybe you have not. Oh wait, you've never played Alchemist, right?
I haven't played Alchemist either, no, and I think that we're going to fix that. If anyone, we're going to fix that Monday.
Monday.
What is Monday's date? Monday, June 1st. We'll be doing a live stream of Alchemist, I think.
Here I am just glowing over a game that you oh man.
But I know the concepts of it. I know that
Right.
this is one of the first app-driven games where the secret formula is hidden within the app, and everyone's trying to solve it and make guesses and clues as to it. This is one of the first Board Boys episodes, I think, even.
Yeah, and it was the first one Rob was on.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, your show is great. If people aren't listening to Board Boys, they really should be. But
Let me just say, if people aren't listening to Meeple Overboard, they should be. We do great. We do good shows, man.
we do.
We do good shows. We do good shows. You do a good show, in my opinion. I do a good show, in your opinion. So, we do good shows.
I think so.
Yeah.
Sorry. So anyway, your other unique game. So Alchemist
The other
for sure.
one that I find so unique, and hopefully maybe you've played this one, is Sidereal Confluence.
Have not played it either.
Okay, so one of the things I think is so hard to get right in any board game is trading.
Yes,
Like,
100%.
because in games that have good, solid, hard economies, like let's say Chinatown, you can just look at how many points somebody's going to get from trading something with you, and so you just like the trades are like always 100% equitable, unless somebody's not doing the math, right?
Okay.
Have you played Chinatown?
I have not. No, that's
Okay.
what I'd like to try for like the learning experience. Though. I don't know if it's my type of game or
Chinatown is
not.
cool. Chinatown is cool, but like it's a game that's heavily based on trading,
Mhm.
but like you can know exactly what's going to happen from the trades you make, because all the trades are basically just point related.
Right.
But then there's like Monopoly, and then there's Settlers of Catan, which have, I think people love inherently to trade things and to make deals, right? But I feel like in those games, either the trades are going to be like lopsided all the time, or there's like a ton of luck, or different groups like value things too much over other groups. But the trades never get very complex, or if they do, maybe there was no reason for them to get complex. Sidereal Confluence is a game where you are making like everybody plays like some very obtuse alien race. Like the paint job of the game is like purposefully like dense and hard sci-fi, which is it grows to be really fun. But like when you sit down and first start playing the game, you're like, wait a second, my race is like just a bunch of sentient eyeballs. Like, can you be like space tigers like Twilight Imperium? And people are like, no, but you can be this assortment of sentient polygons, and actually they're only half sentient. They use a hive mind. Like, but what you're doing is you create. So there's a currency. There's all these different materials in the game. There's little cubes, and there's 3 different colors. There's big cubes, 3 different colors, and then there's like special technology that's like the most valuable type of. So there's like 7 cubes. Then you have spaceships, which are all worth the same, no matter which faction they come from. And then like you can trade literally like anything else in the game, like planets you own, technology, patents you own, yada yada. But what's so cool is, unless you're playing like one of the lower difficulty factions, you generally don't produce the stuff that you need to produce the stuff that you make. And so you can make a ton of stuff, but you have to figure out how to trade it to people, so that you can get the things you need. And you kind of have to watch like what people are doing, because there's a fair trade guideline, right? Like 1 small cube equals 1 other small cube. And generally speaking, like the rounds of the game start with people making all these fair trades, but a lot of the game is like figuring out what people want and waiting till later in the round when you know they're desperate for it, so that they'll trade it to you at like a little bit higher value. But then like it's a social enough game where like if you're gouging people just aren't going to trade with you, because they don't feel like they're getting a deal ever when they trade with you. And if people won't trade with you, then you'll lose. It's just a game that has nailed trading, which I think is the hardest thing to tackle in board gaming, and just like nailed it to the wall, and left a target for everybody else to try to hit in a game that's, I think, relatively obscure, and it's just horrible that it's not more popular, in my opinion.
I think that it's getting a second printing, because the first one's cover was terrible, and I don't think it grabbed anyone's attention. Whereas if you had like a bunch of weird-looking polygons and eyeballs, like trading resources and stuff with each other, like it could look interesting. But yeah, it's a game I've wanted to try, but I'm hesitant.
Yeah, it would be like insanely bad to play it in tabletop sim. Like if somebody made like a platform where you could just like click something, and then the other player could click stuff, and you could like view it in like a box and then hit accept, and they flip to each other, and everybody was playing like a Zoom call, that would be fine. But I mean, on one turn you could make like 50 different items, and then you'll trade like, oh, I'll trade you 4 of those for 5 of those, and then you have to like mouse them over there. I'm sure there's a Sidereal Confluence tabletop simulator mod, but it would be very hard to play in something that wasn't like BGA level setup.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, that's one I'll have to try, because one of my issues with trading in games is just the fact that in a lot of systems like Settlers of Catan, nobody has anything of value to offer. Right, I'll give you 3 pieces of wood for that one wheat. I'm like, no, I don't need wood. How about 5 pieces of wood for that wheat? Like, no, I still don't need wood. So yeah, that sounds like it has a better chance, like a better prospect of being
the trading
really
is just incredible. And the other thing that's really cool is there's 9 factions, and they all have different levels of difficulty. And more often than not, if you're playing the game, it's like the best at like a high player count. Doesn't have to be 8, but like 6 people or so. Well, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be teaching somebody that game every time you play. And there's a couple factions that are much easier to play even if you're not good at making sophisticated trades.
Okay.
And like the higher the difficulties go up, the more chances you have to do interesting things, like with your faction. Like there's one faction that trades away like their generators, and they're like some of the best manufacturing generators in the game, but you can't run them yourself, so you have to like sell the use of them for a round, and then you get them back at the end of the round. And then there's another race that like they make gray cubes, and all of the cubes they make can be any colors, but they're worse generators, so you have to like trade the gray cubes at like a profit. But like the basic faction you can be in the game basically just makes more than everybody else, but you usually just give them to somebody who like doesn't really know what they're doing, but that gives them a chance to like do very well, win the game their first time playing, because the bar is just much lower. And the other thing too is like you can just like kind of like gimp the I never say that word. I don't know if that's like an offensive word.
You can make it harder for the more experienced player.
Exactly. Yeah. So that if you did have like 8 people who were good at the game, the people that were easier wouldn't just roll the people every time. So it's brilliant. We've probably spent too much time talking about Sidereal Confluence in the first episode of our How to Make a Board Game podcast,
but that idea of something unique, that's one of the hard things to tackle. Is I could make, like you and I could make Color Cube Factory, the board game, and it might be a really solid game, and we might send it to a publisher, and they might say, "Why? This is perfectly adequate. Good job, Chris and Cam." If no one's figured it out, that's why it's called CC Board Game Factory, Chris and Cam. Oh,
yeah.
But yeah, they might just say,
"Everybody figure it out now."
But yeah, so they might just say, "That's cool, good, thanks." But if you can make something really unique, like Sidereal Conference, they might look at it and say, "Wow, this is so unique, we're never going to publish it." But there's a chance that if they do, it could be something that really shifts the idea of what a board game is and can do. And so that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome to see what ideas we're gonna propose next time. Let's try and think of something pretty cool and unique.
Well, I think we probably should, just for fan service, because we're already a huge podcast.
Yes.
I think we should wrap this episode up by doing a mini version of what we're going to do for the next several episodes. And that is talk about a couple concepts that we came up with either right exactly now, or if you don't want to do that, Chris, something that's just been bouncing around in your head at any given time.
Okay, sounds good. Let's see. First concept that comes to mind, which would be probably impossible for you and I to actually make, would be a Rocky Road bowling simulator.
So it's a tabletop game that simulates a Rocky Road bowling experience.
Yes, yeah. You have a little wooden ball and you have to flick it through.
So this is a dexterity game.
Yeah, it'd be a dexterity game, and we'd have to somehow either 3D print everything or craft it out of wood, which I don't know how to do either. And so that's the first thought that comes to mind.
Well, hang on. Do we want to explore that? Because I think, obviously, we're at about an hour and 15 minutes. I think it's our inaugural episode, so we can go a little long if we want, right?
Sure.
But I think that we should probably give no more today than 15 minutes to our pitches total.
Yes.
Right? So I think we're going to do one pitch. So are you going to pitch to me the Rocky Road Bowling, the board game today, or do you want to pitch something else? We're not doing 2 pitches from you today.
No. No. You know what? Let's just go for it. Go for it. So, the idea of Rocky Road Bowling, the board game, would be that there would be a lot of modular bits and pieces, and it would have to be a game where you, as the creator, could physically do it. Right? So it's just a bunch of modules. It's basically just a big track, a little wooden ball that you have to flick through the track, and you have to try and knock over pins or get it into the hole or however you want it to be. And you can lay out the board however you want. And so essentially it would be a game of horse right? Like schoolyard, b-ball,
Okay.
horse, right? If you're the guy that makes if you're the guy or the gal that makes the course, you have to be able to do it. And if you can't, then that's not a valid course for other people to come in and try and do. And so if you muck it up, you get maybe 2 shots or whatever. And if you can't do it yourself, then the next person goes. And so I like the idea of having like a modular hole at the end, where like, is it just a flat piece with a little hole in it, or maybe it's kind of like a funnel at the end. If you have a really difficult course, as long as you make it to the end, it'll funnel in directly. Loop the loop obviously has to be a piece in there. Just different types of obstacles and stuff.
Okay. I like this. I think this could be with high production value. It could be a Kickstarter gem, right, Chris?
Right.
This could be. So what? Let's just start at. Let's not even talk about marketability first. Let's just talk about physics, okay?
Yes.
How are you going to propel the ball? What are you going to use?
I assume that it would be like a flicking game, right? Flicking is already an understood mechanism.
Use your finger, so there's not like a little spring-loaded thing. It's 100% you flick the ball.
Yeah, I think so. In my first imagination of this, but like a spring-loaded thing might be good for, like, let's say inclusivity, because one of the things with dexterity in flicking games is if you're just a less dexterous person for whatever reason, you can't participate in them. So if you put it into like a little Hot Wheels launcher type thing, right, or like a little spring-loaded, click, 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 boom, push a button and it shoots, that increases the amount of people that could actually play this wacky game.
Well, see, okay, so let's talk. I think I have an idea for this, and I think that you don't use a Hot Wheels like, I think you use something that is like an actual like pullback spring mechanism, because then it's still a game of finesse, right? But I think if you use a spring-loaded launcher, you're gonna get a more even shot, so you can aim the ball better. But also, I think the weight of the ball and like the material of the ball is very important in something like this. And if you did something that you could flick without hurting your finger, so that you could actually get like the aim you wanted on the the part of your finger that would flick the ball. If you use something like heavy, it would hurt, and if you use something light, it would just go flying, right?
Yeah.
And if you use something in between, it might be hard to aim the thing. So I think like something you pull back, kind of like a pinball plunger.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
That like contours around the ball so that you get a straight shot every time. I think would be the optimal apparatus for this.
It's good.
This thing.
I like this. And as the more I talk about it, I think in reality this would just be a better miniature golf game, because like the idea, obviously I joke with Rocky Road Bowling because it's more of a lane, but the idea of if you have the plunger and you could rotate it however you want, then you could do some more interesting things with angles and banking and stuff, or you could set up a hole where there's a loop-the-loop and you can go through the loop-the-loop, which is the most challenging, or you can try and bank it around some other obstacles and try and get it in, which, just inherently enhances the ability to make it like a horse-style game, where, bounce it off of this thing, or go to the loop-to-loop. Increases the challenge of each design, like each modular thing that person could come up with for the round.
Sure. So here's another thing that I'm thinking too, is this game to me sounds like something that would be best played by a group of 4 to 6. And here's what I'm thinking, and maybe I'm gamifying it too much.
Sure.
But the kit comes with 4 to 6 whole templates that can have items put on them. And what you do is you'd probably draft like certain pieces. Or I don't know if you draft, but like you go grab some pieces, and everybody is working on a hole at the same time, and you probably put it on a timer, right?
Yeah.
And I think what you would need to do is you would just need to maybe honor system complete it before, like, build the thing and complete it before the time is out. And then you go do the sequentially, everybody takes their turn at the thing. And that way you're not spending the entire time of the game watching somebody else like tinker with a thing. And then you have like, a part where you can actually like go do the stuff. But am I thinking in a different direction than you? Because Because I would see the biggest fallacy of a game that's design your own mini golf is too much downtime between the gameplay.
Yeah.
Unless you gamified the gameplay and did it simultaneously.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, simultaneous play keeps people engaged and everything, and maybe, I mean, maybe now this slips into the marketability side of things, but you could get, if you did a Kickstarter, you could get just the one set, and people could take turns, which might be really good for, say, like a group of 2 or 3 people, a family of 4, maybe, while the kids are doing that. Get your one track, but if you want to get like 4 to 6 at the same time, do the super deluxe all-in package, and then you could do this simultaneously, tour, like around the world type setup. And because my only concern, I guess, with doing that would be if it is maybe it's not a concern, right? If you want to make it more like horse, where someone has to directly copy what you did to get the ball into the hole, then you always have to demonstrate, you have to show what shot it is.
Right.
So if you just made the course in such a way that as long as someone got it into the hole, whether they went up the loop-the-loop, or whether they did the ramp, or the side thing, or the bounce off of these things, that gets rid of the need to be able to demonstrate it all in a circle. Or demonstrate it before everybody takes a turn. So I think you're onto something with that. This round-the-world idea totally seems to work.
Nice. Okay, so I think we have proof of concept, and I don't know really what that phrase means, but I think we did it right.
I think we did it geniusly. Is what I'd like to say. It was a very zestful idea for sure.
Yeah, we did it zestfully. So our first official pitch, and again, for those of you listening to episode 1, our plan is to spend the entire next several episodes pitching ideas and actually hashing them out over about 30 minutes each. We'll do about an hour podcast with 2 ideas. But I think that was a good mini pitch, and so I think we should officially throw Rocky Road Bowling, the board game, into the ring for possibilities of what we're going to design on CNC BGF, CNC Board Game Factory.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So that means it's my turn to pitch something, and I'm just going to go off the dome today, okay?
That's exactly what I did. I clearly had not thought this out before.
Okay. So everybody has a person, let's just say that they are, they're equipped with a fire hose and a net. Okay, so this is an adventure game. Okay, everybody has a working fire hose that can just blast water really strong, and then every player character little model on the board has a net. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to blast the other players with water, but also you're trying to use your net to collect crystals that are moving around the game board in between turns.
Like they're sentient, or at least semi-living crystals that are actively moving around?
They're crystal fairies. They're alive crystals that don't want to be caught.
Okay.
And you use the fire hose to blast the other players away from the crystal fairies, and you use your net to catch the crystals.
Okay.
And everybody enters the game board, which is like a maze. But the thing is, your hose it can only go so far, so you have to backtrack, and if you want to be able to reach. But every time you catch a fairy, your hose can go 3 spaces longer.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so okay.
Okay, and so I think the way that this is the final part of my pitch, and then I feel free to come at me with a bunch of questions, and then maybe put your own concept in there. Is I think that what you do, and I know this is going to create a little extra money, but um, there's a like a crystal in the center with a speaker on it, and every turn, you tell it how many crystals are on the board, and it tells you what direction they go and how many spaces. And then on your turn, you have an allotment of action points to do the things you want to do, such as moving, swapping from the net to the fire hose, blasting, and swatting.
This is not the direction I was expecting to go after you're talking about, perfect games like Castles of Burgundy and Teotihuacan. But I like this.
I will say that I literally came up with the design while I was talking about it. And I purposely didn't think about it at all until the minute I had to come up with it. So that one was not rolling around in my head ever, even kind of. I'll come up with some board game ideas for you, Chris. But this is just my first concept. I wanted to see how floppy I could get with it. And this is to me, this is a family game, probably in the same vein as like Dynamite or Tornado Rex. We're going to use those little plastic pieces that kind of have that little like walking thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And then maybe they're attached to like a string at the end of the board.
So what I was thinking that would work really well potentially for the fire hose length thing is that you're allowed it would essentially be like a Carcassonne, like a tile laying game, right? As the further you move your miniature out, you have to lay another tile behind it. That way, you're not dragging stuff physically along the path, right? Your hose can be 6 tiles long at the start of the game,
and that would help you get the upgrade, right? Like if you got upgrades, then you can get more tiles.
Exactly. Yeah, you have a higher number of tiles that you can use so that you can move the guy around. I like the idea of backtracking. Means that you're getting some more slack on the hose, i.e., picking up the tiles that you're moving back over, so that you can kind of shift directions. Go on.
It would be really easy actually to make these tiles too, because they could be double-sided, and one side could be straight, and then the other side could be like an elbow. And then half the tiles can just have an elbow going that way, and half the tiles can have an elbow going that way.
Well, I mean, the L's would be the same. You just rotate them, right?
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that's a great idea, the double-sided tiles, because I was like, how do you keep track of turns, elbows, or straight? You just double-side them. So you have 6 tokens to work with at the start of the game. And then, if you can get an upgrade, you can get more tiles length of your hose. One of my first thoughts is the concern of making if the goal of the game is to get more crystal fairies, which I love, by the way, just conceptually love. If you get more crystal fairies, I don't think that should lengthen the amount of hose that you can get, because the goal of the game shouldn't be what makes you stronger, I think.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's really good.
Yeah, so you can try and get other upgrades and stuff. So you can either focus on getting points with how much hose you have, or you can get upgrades that will lengthen the amount of hose that you can get. So right there, I think that helps separate the two elements. I almost always think of Dominion, the deck building game, in regards of that. Like, when you get victory points in that game, you're weakening the strength of your deck, which I love that concept. So,
go ahead.
I was going to call it Fire Hose Rally or something like that. I was just going to spitball a name.
Well, I think it would be called Fire Hose Fairies.
Fire Hose Fairies, yes. So
let me throw out a couple last little ideas here, so that when we listen to this again and we come back and we think about these ideas, is so I was thinking maybe like an action expenditure system similar to like Tikal is the first game I had that did that, where like it's like an action or two to like move, like each space you move might cost an action to like switch between your fire hose and your net cost in action, but like blasting your fire hose could be like one action per space you're pushing the other person back. And then like or like to swing at the fairy could be one like 2 actions or something. But I think that if we're going to talk about balancing the game, we might want to think, okay, is there an action that blasts you with the fire hose so hard that you go flying off the board? And I think yes, that somebody could use a whole turn to like really wail on somebody and like blow them off the board so they had to start again. However, if that happens to you, you get an upgrade before your next turn, and the player who blasted all their fire hose juice at you can't use their fire hose on the next turn. And the upgrade you get for getting blown off the board is permanent. Also, maybe like a wizard that goes around the board and you have to find him, and that's how you get the upgrade.
Let's see. I think that there should be some reward for fire hosing someone so hard that they fly off the board. Like, you should get points. You should get 3 points, for example, but the person who gets blasted off gets the upgrade, so that there's a dual incentive there.
So the board would be kind of a maze, but I think there'd be a lot of like open edges on the board.
Yes, I agree.
And
There'd have to be.
And then like if you blast somebody, like, so say they're 4 spaces away from an empty edge, if you can expend 4 action points to blast them 4 spaces off the board, then they have to start again on their next turn. They have to pick up all their hose and begin again. But then they get an upgrade for getting blasted off, and then you get points. I think that's, and I think since you're spending your action points to do it, maybe that doesn't have any bearing on whether or not. Plus, because that's all the time you spend blasting people with the fire hose, that's time you're not spending catching the fairy.
Exactly, which is why you need the incentive to some degree, which would be like, a small allotment of points, right? And that can make a huge difference.
Maybe a fairy is 5. Maybe some of the fairies are worth different amounts of points. But then it's a standard amount of points for blasting the people off. So I think we've got a good idea here on how we're going to make fire hose fairies. Fairies and fire hoses. Well, I don't know. Do we like fire hose fairies?
I think I like fire hose fairies the most. It's the direct alliteration that sounds very it catches notice, especially for kids. Like if this is kind of marked as like a family tier game.
No, this is definitely a family game. Although it is going to have enough take that in there with the fire hoses, where you don't want to play with kids who have a hard time with direct conflict.
Yeah. Well, and then another idea that I'm just spitballing out there now is you could create, and I don't always love it when games do this, but you could create like a cooperative mode or something in it, where you could actually team up and you could blast the fairies, the crystal fairies, with your fire hose into the net of some of the other players, and so like you could kind of work together in that sense.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, and maybe we need to rethink how the nets work, because maybe you can extend the net as an action too, to put it out there. But yeah, okay, so I think we have a good idea for 2 games. So we'll see if these ones stand the test of time after we get into some more discussions. But let's just go. Okay, so I think it's going to be important to summarize.
What if we lacked in accomplishment today? Now, what have we lacked in accomplishment today?
Very little. I think we crushed it. I think we knocked it out of the park. I think we did a half hour longer than we want to normally do. I think that's fine today. I think it's the pilot episode, right? And the pilot's always longer. But I think to summarize today, our plan for the next several episodes is to do some pitches just like we were doing in the last 20 minutes of this podcast. But I think it's important we talk about Rocky Road Bowling, the board game, or what? Sorry, did we come up with a name for that, or is that what it's called?
I mean, it might be at this point Rocky Road Mini Golf. Yeah.
Okay.
Rocky Road Mini Golf Tabletop or something like that.
Yeah. Or maybe it's like Rocky Road : Tabletop Mini Golf.
Yes, we have a winner.
And Rocky Road is the name of the park. That is the
I
like
love
the
it.
box is really colorful. It says "Welcome to Rocky Road." It shows like people at the counter like getting their golf balls. I think there should be a little like all the balls should be different colors like you have at the mini golf course.
100%. Yeah.
So we have Rocky Road, tabletop mini golf, or is it tabletop mini golf or is it tabletop miniature golf?
Mini golf for sure. That's more.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that would appeal to me more as a kid.
Okay, great.
And as a grown up who's essentially a kid still.
And this is a design your own mini golf course, probably horse style game.
Yeah.
Where you create your own miniature golf holes, and the goal is to sink them in one shot, because we're not going to be using little putters. We're going to be using a spring-loaded, like pinball plunger,
yeah,
snapper mechanism. I think to push like a decent-sized ball. Like, are you thinking the balls are like that big?
I was thinking a half-inch diameter, but I mean that could be messed with maybe a little bit bigger to make sure that they're weighted enough to stay on the ground.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
But
So
yeah.
we'll come back to that if we workshop this game some more.
Yeah, I love it.
That's concept 1. Concept 2 is Fire Hose Ferries, a competitive ferry capturing game in which you move with a fire hose and a net through a labyrinth, blasting your friends with a fire hose off the board and capturing fairies that don't want to be captured. We didn't get into the theme, but probably to bring them back to your village to use for mana.
I love anachronisms in games. Like I mean, just in general, stuff like that. So yes, the idea that you have industrial strength fire hoses because you need to collect fairies for mana to protect your village.
These aren't industrial strength fire hoses; they're magical fire hoses.
Yes,
the water flows through them. If you think about, I don't really know how a fire hydrant works, but I think it has mostly to do with pressure, right? Fire hydrants are not electronic, right?
Yeah.
So you just have probably some pressure back at where the fire hose ends at your village, right? But they're magical, extending fire hose. Like the wizard can cast a spell on your fire hose to make it go farther in the fairy forest.
Yes.
So I think we have 2 really good ideas here, and I'm really excited to start talking about more board game concepts.
Yeah.
With you, Chris.
Oh, for sure. And when we come back next time for pitches, if we have more thoughts on Fire Hose Fairies or Rocky Road.
I think that maybe should be the first thing we do every episode that we're pitching is recap our pitches from the last time and take a second look at them. When we call the meeting, we're finishing our coffee, we're erasing the whiteboard, and then we get down there. We talk about last week's minutes, right?
Absolutely.
Of the pitches, and then we bring out our new pitches, and that's when we take notes and we throw them to the wall and see what sticks.
Perfect. All right, I love this.
So I think we've done a very good first episode. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think we knocked it out of the baseball aroma park, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So CNC Board Game Factory. We'll have to come up with all of our inside jokes and things we say probably later. We don't have any social media yet, right? But we'll get on that.
Yep. I should make you make a Twitter account.
Yeah, I will make a Twitter account for a CNC Board Game Factory, and I will make an Instagram account for CNC Board Game Factory.
Nice.
And I think it's yet to be determined what we're going to tweet and Instagram, but we will.
Who knows? Who cares at this point?
Yeah, and hopefully we'll be able to actually let you guys watch our brainstorming sessions live here pretty soon as well. So, yeah, really excited. Great podcast, great project we're working on here. I'm really excited.
Yeah, so we'll try and make a Twitter account. We'll try and make a Instagram, Gmail account. Is ccbgfactory@gmail.com if you want to suddenly write us for no reason and tell us that Rocky Road sounds fantastic or Fire Hose Fairies gets your vote on what we should be doing. I think it'd be awesome if we could actually get some feedback and stuff too of what people might seem interested in pursuing ideas with and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And so thank you to the 2 people who have already listened to this, even before we post it. That's you and me.
Yes,
And
yeah, big thank you to us too.
yeah, so your ideas were great today, both of you guys. And we'd like to hear from the rest of you that are listening to this. What kind of board games that we've talked about do you like? And are there any ideas you have that maybe we should give talk about on the air?
And you know, I just thought of this now because this entire episode has just been thinking stuff off the noggin. If people want to share with us, once we get some like social media up and going stuff, if people want to share with us things that they're workshopping, things that they're working on, and make this kind of like a community of creativity and collaboration, in other words, that start with C, because title,
Yes.
right?
Community and Collaboration Board Game Factory.
Hey, there you go. Yeah, we fooled y'all. Ashton Kutcher's gonna run out here and be like, "Pranked! You thought it was Chris and Cam board game factory." All right, we better wrap up before we go on too long. I can hang out and talk with you all day, Cam. So anyway, my name is Chris.
And this is Cam.
Thank you so much for listening to CNC Board Game Factory.
Things that make you go, hmm.